All right, Gonzan here with another Trailspace Review Corps review. This time it's the SnowPeak Penta Air Ultralight shelter. It's a tarp type shelter, shaped tarp with a catenary cut so that it can be pitched really tight, and with just a trekking pole and a few tent stakes. This review is going to kind of be quick and dirty. One go at it with the video here on my phone, because I've been a little too busy lately. But anyway, let's just get to it. All right, I have already taken out the shelter and set it up here in my yard to give you a pretty good idea of what's going on with it. This is the pitched tarp. Just gonna walk all the way around it here, let you see its general appearance and shape and how it's staked off. Okay, so that is the shelter. How this thing is pitched: you take the tarp and lay it out flat on the ground, and with one tent stake, you stake in the tail of the tarp, and then you come up here to the top, and with an extended tent pole or a long branch, the tent pole slides through a ring right here on the end of the tarp, right here. So the tent pole goes through, and then the guy line runs up and over the top of the tent pole. And this is something I'll show you. This is something I added. I'll show that to you a bit later. So you extend that out. And actually, I'm forgetting here for a second. Before you do the riser here, you pull the two backside corners out and stake them out. Not really tight, just barely kind of pulling it out flat, and stake that in. Then you pull this up, and that holds the whole thing rigid. Then you pull the corners out, and you stake them. Now the two front corners over there and over here are equipped with line lock sliders that allow you to tension the tarp quite nicely. Now, one of the things that I found is that these guy lines that have been provided here, you see, I've shortened it slightly just by tying a figure 8 on a bite up here towards the top. And that's just because I wanted to pitch this low in its simplest configuration with its smallest footprint. I have used this now in multiple different settings, pitching it really high on tent poles at each of the corners, from a tree to pitch it higher, and also with stakes under the back corner, wooden stakes. So if you want to raise the height of the shelter up so you have more room underneath, because this shelter really does not have that much height between the ground and the actual shelter, with just a standard extended 140 centimeter trekking pole. I have actually taken to lashing two trekking poles together to get some more height out of it, and then also putting a tall rock or a branch under the back two corners, like so. So I've got this stick, and let's say I want to raise the height of the rear of this shelter up, just staking it up, and it gives a little bit more ventilation and a little bit more height, which translates into a little bit more headroom and makes it less likely that your bag is going to be touched by the wet tarp in a rainstorm or some snow. You see how much more room that gave underneath just by raising up that one end. For a bit of analysis on this tarp, that mosquito net that you see there, that did not come with it. That was not part of the package. In the package that I received was the tarp, the guy lines, the stuff sack that it came in, right here, instructions, and a bag for the tent stakes. Now, the stakes themselves are quite nice. Let me go ahead and pull one of those up. You can see here it's a Y-type tent stake. Sort of like a, well, I won't name any other brands, but it works very nicely. They're strong. They're not too long. They could be longer, but I haven't had any trouble with them keeping it secure. Anyway, so that's what came with in the package when I received the shelter. I do find that though this shelter is really light, it is easy to pack up in its stuff sack. The stuff sack is a little small just to stuff everything down into. I found that trying to roll it up was very difficult because of the odd shape of the shelter. I guess that's just something to get used to, but for the amount of weight and space that it takes up in your pack, it's a nice shelter. But for the amount of ground area that this shelter takes up, the ratio of space needed to pitch the shelter to the actual usable space underneath it, especially if you're considering in a rainstorm where you're getting some movement sideways, I really don't find it to be a whole lot of shelter. 2 people could adequately weather a storm, but you're going to have some mist and some cast-off water from splashing on the ground and wind that's going to end up being on you and your pack, even if you pitched this thing all the way to the ground, because there's just no way to get far enough underneath it. You see this distance there from the trekking pole to the rear end. Even if both people are angled with their heads towards this side and their feet that way, there's just not that much room. Your heads are close up here to the head of the shelter. It works, but I don't imagine it will be my go-to shelter. For comparison, also look at how much distance there is from this stake all the way out to there. I haven't gotten a ruler to measure that. I'll do that here when I finish making up this video. So if you pitch this thing higher with more room underneath it, you end up having to take up more room. So you need so much space to pitch this thing. I just don't find with adequate space underneath it and adequate height underneath it. Of course, with a higher tent pole, you can pitch it with a more aggressive angle on the tarp, but then you have to have a taller pole, and it reduces the distance between the front and the back of the shelter. As you raise up this direction, you actually move backwards to achieve that height. Now, for a bit of comparison, this is just a simple rectangular tarp pitched in a basic modified triangle shape, kind of a similar pitch to this shelter with just a rectangular tarp. And you see there's as much room pitched this way underneath it as usable room as underneath the Penta shelter. And it's quite taut, which can shed rain and weather just as well. If you have a couple extra stakes, you can stake it out here in the middle and as easily or more easily raise up the other end a bit and have a modified A-frame and have a lot of very good usable space with, in my opinion, more protection from the elements than the Penta shelter. That's just my opinion. I've used this, and I think if I had to choose, I find the rectangular tarp more versatile. You can use it a lot in a number of manners and ways that the Penta shelter really doesn't facilitate very well. The last detail was, being that it's just a tarp, if you are in the parts of the country that I backpack a lot, you're going to want a mosquito net of some kind. So I just got an aftermarket mosquito net, piece of paracord run over the top here through, through this grommet. There's another grommet on the end, so it loops over the stake, up underneath, through the grommet, and over the hiking pole, and then down here, the cord runs through the loop in the top of the net, and behind that I've just got a little grapevine knot, slider knot, so that I can position it where I want it. And it's not ideal. This isn't obviously made for it, but stretching it out with a couple rocks or twigs or even tent stakes, it works pretty well for 2 people. Better for 1 person, but it works adequately well. So that is the Penta shelter. I hope this gives you a better understanding, idea of its the amount of shelter that it provides, its ease of function, and enough information to decide whether it's something good for you or not. All right, I think I will sign off now, gentlemen and ladies. Have a good night.